This week has caused so many what ifs, but what if it didn't matter when you listen or where you're listening from? Because my name is Eric, and this is the Five Head Podcast. Welcome to episode 4 of the podcast. I know there's going to be about 25 to 30 of you consistent listeners, and I really appreciate that. I really do. If you don't mind this time, do me a little bit more of a favor and click that like and subscribe button. Costs you nothing, and it really helps a brother out. So this week, I wanted to talk about what could actually happen if one of our branches of government just completely ignored the other branch. And if you followed me at all on X, on other social medias, I've kind of brought this up before. What happens, especially with the judicial branch, when they make a ruling? What happens if the other two branches ignore it? And something else happened this week that brings up that same question. And what happened this week is not getting as much media coverage as it should, because the cry for Epstein files release has just taken over our daily lives. But what happened this week, Judge Talwani, I think her first name is Indira. I apologize if I'm not saying that correctly. Anyway, out of Massachusetts, federal district judge has blocked a provision in the One Big Beautiful Bill, which was passed by Congress and signed off on by the president, that defunds Planned Parenthood. So, of course, the people on the right are screaming about this, and people on the left are cheering it. But regardless of how you feel about defunding Planned Parenthood, SCOTUS ruled earlier this year that a single judge can't induce a nationwide injunction. Now, when you read into this a little bit more, apparently the reason why she was able to do this was because she was issuing a preliminary injunction for the plaintiffs specific to this case, and the plaintiff in this case was Planned Parenthood. So if she would have blocked the provision in the bill specifically, and that provision in the bill states, or rather bars, federal Medicaid reimbursements to tax-exempt organizations that also provide abortions. So she didn't block that specific ruling, which applies to any of these organizations that provide abortions. She made it specific to the case at hand, which is what SCOTUS ruled a couple months ago when it came to nationwide injunctions. But since Planned Parenthood is a nationwide abortion clinic, one of the premier abortion clinics, I'm not saying they don't offer other services, but they do specialize in abortions. This is being looked at now as her ruling is defending Planned Parenthood. Now, I'm not going to get into abortion from an ideological standpoint. There are legit arguments for people who are against abortion, and there are legit arguments for people who are pro-choice. And then there are legit arguments of whether or not tax dollars should be going to fund those kind of services. That will come in time. On this podcast, I plan on diving into the ideological differences between the overall left and the overall right, and the far left and the far right. But that's not what this episode's about. So my question, again, what would happen if one branch of government decided to completely ignore another branch of government? So I first posed this question on social media when Trump got into office and immediately started signing EOs. And everything he was signing, there was some judge that was blocking the EOs. That's why we got to the nationwide injunction case in SCOTUS. Should a judge single-handedly be able to stop a piece of government policy from being applied across the nation? And SCOTUS ruled that it should not. However, SCOTUS did rule it should be a case-by-case basis, etc. Anyway, I digress. The point is, what if in that situation, a president, not just Trump, any president, signs an EO, and a judge blocks it? And a president decides, you know what? I don't care if this judge blocked it. I'm going to do it anyway. What happens? Like, what could a judge do to a president, a sitting president? The judge doesn't have a Department of Justice that it can order to go arrest the president. Department of Justice is in the executive branch, which the president heads. A judge could, I guess, send a letter to a president and say, I demand you show up in court for violating the ruling. And if that president doesn't show up, what happens? I've asked this question because it appears to me that the only way the Constitution that we have works and the separation of powers between the three branches of government works is if everyone involved willingly follows it. Because there's two branches of our government, the legislative branch and the judicial branch, that don't have control over any kind of actual authority. Their authority only works because someone listens to what they've ruled. The executive branch is the only branch that has federal agents, that has authority backed by people who enforce the authority. Do you get what I mean? So when Congress passes legislation that says you're not allowed to own an AR-15 anymore, it's not Congress who is employing federal agents to go out onto the streets and make sure you don't have an AR-15 in your hand. It's the executive branch. So Congress passes the laws, the executive branch enforces the laws, and then the judicial branch challenges those laws in court and gives people their chance at a defense in court. So the only one with any kind of enforcement authority and the manpower to do so and the ability to order someone to actually go do something is the executive branch. So if the executive branch decides to simply not listen to something that the legislative or the judicial branch legislates, what is the legislative branch and the judicial branch even able to do? Of course, that all revolved around Trump because he was signing a lot of EOs, trying to exercise his right to make Doge cuts and things like that he believed he had the power to do as the head of the executive branch. He didn't just believe he had the power to do it. The EOs that are written are drawn off of acts that have been passed by Congress. So depending on how you interpret the provisions in these bills and acts that are passed by Congress, kind of determines what power you think the president has to draw off of those bills. And in Trump's mind, he had every right to make the Doge cuts that he made. He had every right to sign all the EOs that he's signed since he's been back in office. And now something like 60% of the EOs that he has signed since coming back in office has been blocked. So I remember when he first got back in, he started signing a bunch of EOs, and it was every day we got a new headline, a new report on how this judge has blocked this EO. And I thought to myself, what if Trump just did it anyway? Not that I want him to, I'm just curious. What could the courts actually do? What happened this week is now a new wrinkle in that, where it's Congress who legislated the funding of Planned Parenthood, essentially. They didn't name Planned Parenthood directly, but they defunded Medicaid dollars going to places that provide abortions. And this judge has blocked it, and it's not a permanent block. It's going to get challenged, and it's going to go up to SCOTUS. But what if Congress didn't listen? Like, Congress doesn't have to listen to the judge. Congress has the power of the purse. Congress can literally direct the Treasury Department to not make those Medicaid monetary transfers to Planned Parenthood, right? And what if they did? What if they just said, I don't care what this judge says. We are not having funds transferred from our coffers to Planned Parenthood. What could the judge do? Now, in that situation, when it's the legislative branch not listening to the judicial branch, or the judicial branch not listening to the legislative branch, you could assume that, in theory, the executive branch could step in and enforce it because they have the manpower and essentially the guns to do it. That's all it is. Congress doesn't have an FBI. Congress doesn't have U.S. Marshal Service. Congress doesn't have a bunch of agents with guns under their command. The executive branch does. In theory, the executive branch could pick a side when there's a power struggle between the judicial and the legislative branch. In theory, backed by the gun. But really, all the legislative branch has to do in this instance is not transfer the money that they said they weren't going to transfer once the big, beautiful bill is passed. And what could the judge actually do? Now, that's not going to happen. This judge's ruling is going to be challenged probably all the way up to the Supreme Court, and everyone will be waiting, and then we'll get a final ruling from the Supreme Court whether or not Congress has the authority to defund Planned Parenthood. And I think they will. I think this block is temporary, and this judge knows this. Because what's funny is, when Trump was passing a bunch of EOs, and again, I'm not saying I agree or disagree with the EOs. That's not what I'm talking about here. Try to put that aside. But when Trump was passing these EOs and these judges were all blocking it, and you can try to say they were blocking it because they were doing the right thing with the rule of law. Some argue that it's activists because it's Trump and these are left-wing judges. A little bit of both is probably true, but let's not kid ourselves. When you look at the amount of EOs that were blocked all the way back to 2000 when Bush was president, it's something like 3% of Bush's EOs were blocked. Something like 9% of Obama's EOs were blocked. Something like 6% of Biden's EOs are blocked. And it's like 30% of all Trump's EOs were blocked. And in all of those blockage of all those presidents, it's like 90 something percent of those blockages are coming from the opposite party's judges. So there is some truth to the quote, quote, activist thing. But in order to make sure that it can't be proven it's just activism and that it's just politics, judges in their decision give a legal reason for their decision. So when Trump was passing all these EOs and they came back this year, and these judges were all blocking these EOs, their legal reasoning behind it was Congress needs to legislate. The act that the EO was drawn off of was not clear. If the president has this authority to draw the specific of an EO, Congress needs to step in. Congress needs to legislate. Trump needs to slow down, and Congress needs to solidify his EOs and his agenda through legislation. And that's something I agree with in a general sense. The whole point of Congress even being there is to legislate. We've gotten too far into governing by EO over the last 25, 30 years because Congress has been so split that a president can't get their agenda passed after being elected. So they're doing everything they can by executive order. And that needs to stop. Congress needs to do their job. My point is, these judges were saying or trying to justify their blocking as not political and totally legit. It's just you need Congress to legislate to make things more clear. Well, in this case, Congress did legislate. They're taking away tax dollars from organizations that provide abortions. This passed Congress, the legislative branch, and signed into law by the executive branch. So that excuse that, well, no, Congress needs to legislate this doesn't apply here. Congress did legislate. So why is this judge able to block it? Now, like I said in the beginning, technically the judge didn't do a nationwide injunction. The judge was following the SCOTUS ruling. They can't impose a nationwide injunction. They can just rule on the specific case at hand. They ruled on the plaintiff, which is Planned Parenthood, who also just happens to be a nationwide clinic. So it's going to apply to all of them nationwide. We know why the judge is doing the blockage, because she doesn't agree with defunding Planned Parenthood. However, what legal base does she have for blocking a provision of a bill signed off on in Congress? And her reason is, this leads to funding cuts that reduce services and patient accesses. And federal judges have long held power under judicial review to enjoin unconstitutional laws passed by Congress. So this is a temporary injunction with her legal right, at least in her explaining in her decision to do so, that will go to full trial. And like I said, I don't think it will hold. SCOTUS will overrule that, as Congress has the power of the purse, and a law passed by the legislative branch and then signed off on by the president is a legitimate law. So as of right now, it's temporary. But what if Congress decided not to listen to her temporary halt anyway, and just did not let funds go from the U.S. coffers to Planned Parenthood? What could the judge do? Now, if SCOTUS passes a ruling and a lower court judge ignores that ruling in their next case, then that judge can be disbarred. If a president ignores a bill that was signed off on in Congress and through the presidency without going through the proper channels to have it changed or stopped or ended or whatever, sunsetted, then Congress can impeach the president and the Senate can vote to have the president removed from office if they choose. But if a Senate did convict the president and quote, quote, remove him from office, it would still take the Department of Justice, the Secret Service, the enforcers in the executive branch to be the ones to enforce Congress's ruling against the president, who is their boss. So it still takes everyone involved to believe in and willingly participate in this constitutional republic's setup. And isn't that kind of a scary thing to think about? What if Congress right now just said, we don't care what judge says, we're not giving them the funds. What next? Do you think Trump is going to have his Department of Justice arrest members of Congress? Who would they even arrest? How do you even do that? The entire Congress, if they vote on a resolution to say we're not listening to what the judge says, we're not listening to what SCOTUS says, and this could be any situation, any president, any political party. What actually happens? If it comes down to power in the most natural sense, meaning the strongest and the mightiest has the power, then really all any president would have to do is fill their enforcers, the ones who are employed to carry guns and enforce the laws of the books, to do whatever they want. And who's going to stop them? I know, that's crazy talk. There's no way in hell any president would be able to convince every agent in the executive branch and every member of the military to go along with their own idea to take over the country. That's never going to happen. But if Congress were to ignore the judge and the president took the side of the judge, I guess the executive branch could then hold Congress accountable for it. Because you can't talk an entire military or Department of Justice or all the agents in the executive branch to turn on the entire country and let the president reign as king. But if Congress were to ignore this judge's ruling, you can convince enough people to apprehend and arrest everyone in Congress who ignored the judge's ruling. Now, this president's not going to do that. If Congress decides in this situation to ignore the judge's ruling, the president is going to be happy about that. That's what brings me to that main question. What could the judge do? What could the judicial branch do to Congress, to the president? And the answer really is nothing. There's separation of powers. They make a ruling and it's up to the other two branches to play along with that ruling, or nothing happens. And it's really crazy if you think about it. It might be something you can consider as a flaw in our constitutional republic. The other thought is the people could step up, but then that makes criminals out of the people. People can't apprehend members of Congress even if they believe it's following the Constitution. The people can't apprehend members of the judicial branch because that's violating laws. And the amount of weaponry and force in the executive branch, especially if you include the military, is greater than the people. There is actually more people in this country with guns than there are our military. However, when you're looking at it from a group of people are going to go hold Congress accountable for not listening to a judge's ruling, there's not enough people that can get to and assemble outside of Congress to be able to take on defense of Congress by the military or agents within the executive branch. So really, there's nothing the judge can do. There's nothing anyone can do if Congress just decided to ignore this judge's ruling and defund Planned Parenthood anyway. And that's just interesting to think about for me. I mean, you can make the argument that it's the judicial branch right now that is not willingly participating in this great constitutional republic by actively trying to block everything one politician does or one political party does. And again, abortion, funding it, not funding it, these are all things that are legit arguments on both sides, and we will get into at some point in the podcast. But that's not what I'm talking about. Whether you agree with it or not, should we be championing one of the branches of our government doing everything they can to stop another branch of the government based on politics, based on personal preference of the subject matter? I don't know. It's a very interesting thing to me to watch play out. So what if? Just ask yourself, what if that were to happen on a real scale? Also, I challenge you to ask yourself, what if there is no more evidence to the Jeffrey Epstein cases? I know I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again for the person in the back. What if there's actually no evidence to tie anyone else to the raping of these women? What if that's the reason why we haven't seen any other arrests in the last 6 years? The only ones that have been arrested for actually committing these heinous crimes are Epstein himself and his wife, Ghislaine Maxwell. Again, however the hell you pronounce her name. And of course, everyone wants to believe that the politician they hate the most is on some list in the Department of Justice at the FBI somewhere, backed by evidence that they raped these women and these children. Some reason the FBI, for 6 years now, has just not wanted to get any justice, has just seen this name on this list, has all this evidence that this name has raped women and children, and just decided we're just going to let this person go scot-free because that's what's happened essentially. If there are others that they can prove raped women and children, then they've just kind of let them go free. So what if there's not? What if everything we've seen is actually all there is? Now we're getting more snippets, pictures of people with Epstein, stuff like that. But what if that's all there is? I mean, there's a list of names, all right. Epstein was arrested and investigated. When being investigated, they're going to talk to everyone who's ever been in the same room as him ever, because they're going to need to build a case. They want character witnesses to build on his character. They want any potential eyewitnesses to any kind of detrimental behavior that he's engaged in. And he was in elite rich circles. There's going to be hundreds of people that throughout his adult life he's associated with. And those names are going to be in the investigation files. But belonging to the same country club as Epstein and seeing him there, for example, does not mean that you've raped women and children with him. So when Trump makes a comment like it would ruin a bunch of people's lives, I actually agree with that. It would, because we, as the public, have already decided that if anyone has ever even knew Jeffrey Epstein, that means they also raped women and children. So when the files eventually come out and there's these people's names, oh, this person had the same country club membership as him, that means that person raped women and children. That's what it's going to be in the eyes of public opinion, even though there's nothing there to actually convict that person in court, because being at a country club with someone doesn't mean you raped people. But in the eyes of public opinion, it could ruin their lives. And if they're actors and movie stars, they could not get jobs. If they're politicians, they could lose their vote, their whole careers over, etc. And that will happen. But what if there's no actual evidence to tie anyone to raping these women? Are we willing to accept that? What if the case is closed? I mean, what else is taking so long? Got Congress now fighting each other over the files. But did you know that both parties now have formally requested resolutions to have the files released, and both parties now have blocked it? It's just become a game. I'm going to put in this resolution to have files released, and I'm going to tie it to other bills. I'm going to add some other stuff in there so that when the other side says no to this particular resolution, maybe for not even the files themselves, but because of whatever else is mixed in with that resolution, then I'm going to go on social media and claim, see, they are blocking Epstein files from being released. Both sides have done this now, and both sides have said no to the other side's resolution to release the files for whatever reason. And now you've got the GOP just going on recess over the Epstein files. It's the craziest thing. And in a way, this is kind of a win for Democrats. You've only got until 2026, and then there's going to be landlocked in Congress. Keep saying it until it happens, and I'll say I'm right. And I'm not some like genius or awesome predictor. I can't see the future. It's just naturally, it's not gonna go past 2026. No president in my lifetime has ever had Congress for more than 2 years. So in 2026, the House will flip blue and they'll be landlocked. So if the GOP decides to stay in recess for any amount of time over these Epstein files, which makes absolutely no sense, then all they're doing is losing time that they have to pass Trump's agenda before 2026. And the Democrats have all the upper hand here. This is the best thing to happen to them politically, because the longer files are not released, or more importantly, people aren't arrested for raping these women and children, or it doesn't come out that they just don't have any other evidence to arrest people for raping women and children. If the case does not get closed, it just helps the Democrats. They can speculate all they want and put out anything they want because no one is proving it otherwise. But also, they don't have a candidate in the fight right now. It's not election season. So right now, it's very easy for all of them to say, I don't care if Bill Clinton is in it. Release the files and arrest him if need be. I don't care if Joe Biden's in it. Release the files and arrest him if need be. Don't care if Obama's in it. Release the files and arrest him if need be. And they could play this game. It's because they care about the victims, not the politician, not protecting a politician. And that's completely fair game. And what Republicans are saying is, and it just doesn't hold as much weight because there's a but to it. But what they're arguing is not that they support people who rape women and children, but there just needs to be proof that it's happening. So when your party is not worrying about an election right now, and they don't have your party in power right now, it's very easy to just say, arrest them all. Let's just accuse anyone we want and arrest them all because we don't support pedos. But no one supports pedos. The argument here is whether or not that politician you hate so much, whether it's a Democrat politician or a Republican politician, is a pedo. And that's the evidence that we're waiting on. And I think for the most part, the majority of Republicans out there, if there's some evidence that Trump was raping these women and children through Epstein, would say ring his ass up. Of course, there's going to be some MAGA bros that just no matter what, it's never going to happen. But I think we're all on the same page here. It's just everyone's speculation is different. What everyone really wants to be true is different. The only way that we're ever going to get fully on the same page about Epstein is if all the information comes out, if all the evidence comes out. But what if there is no evidence? What if aliens landed on our planet in November? You guys have seen this story, right? I'm sure. Harvard found some object moving through space that one of the scientists at Harvard has said that its trajectory movements and its potential to change course and all this other stuff somehow that they've noticed suggests that it's not a natural object like a meteor or an asteroid. There could potentially be some sort of space probe or aliens. Like, this is not like Alex Jones using the metal plate in his head to talk to aliens thing. This is like scientists at Harvard that have found this object. And now other astrophysicists and scientists, astronomers, I don't know how you even classify, other people that study space have kind of criticized it because apparently the scientists who made the claim that it could be some sort of alien probe or it could be some sort of non-naturally made thing that's floating and heading towards Earth is kind of always on that theory with everything that he finds, I guess. But still, it makes you think, right? Like, what if everything we're talking about here in this podcast doesn't matter because we're going to get invaded by aliens in November anyway? And the apocalyptic stuff always intrigues me. It's like I'm addicted to zombie movies and movies where an asteroid hits trying to find a way to survive the aftermath. It's intriguing to me. It's kind of almost, I don't know, like the thought of some sort of apocalyptic event happening. For some reason, I believe, and maybe it's due to all these movies, all these zombie shows, but I believe I would survive the initial wave of it. Right? Asteroid hits, I would survive the initial fallout. Zombie apocalypse happens in the middle of the day. I would survive that initial wave to get home and figure out how we're going to progress from here on. And I'm probably wrong. I wouldn't. The vast majority of us wouldn't survive an apocalyptic event. But for some reason, I believe I would. The fantasy of it all always starts with that initial wave is done. Now we're just kind of surviving, and how will we do it? I guess that's why I like these movies, these type of TV shows and stuff like that, because it makes you think, what would you do? What would you do in that situation? How would you survive on a day-to-day basis? And the reality is, like, I get angry if I wake up on a Saturday morning and we're out of coffee. I don't know how the heck I would survive just living completely naturally, but I feel like I would. And then once you feel like you would be able to live naturally and you start running through all these fantasies in your head when you can't fall asleep at night or right after you've watched a zombie show or movie about how you would do it, you start to believe that you could survive a full life like that. But there's just something like, I don't know, almost satisfying about it. The idea of like not having to worry about going to work and paying your bills and getting your kid to school on time. Something about the idea of becoming part of the food chain again, where your only matter of existence every day is to just not die. It's to just eat something, drink water, and keep yourself safe from Earth's elements and other species on Earth. I don't know. There's just something attractive about that idea. When in reality, most of us couldn't live like that. Just we've gotten so used to the luxuries of having a civilized society. We've gotten used to not being part of the food chain. Isn't that crazy? We're one of the only species on the planet that is, for all intents and purposes, no longer in the food chain. Like, granted, if you're wandering around some forest somewhere or in the wild somewhere away from human civilization, yeah, you're kind of back in the food chain. You got to worry about that. But for the most part, when we're just in our communities, we're not. But what's funny about the idea of an alien invasion, instead of all of these apocalyptic ideas, like an asteroid hitting and changing the way life is, wiping out most of life on the planet, how would you survive if you happen to survive that initial blast? How would you survive that? And like the zombie apocalypse, if you survived that initial wave and now you're just kind of living, I feel like those would be easier to survive than alien invasion. Because when you think about it, if there was a zombie apocalypse, the zombies aren't smart, at least in how they've been depicted in every show that we've seen, every movie or whatever. Zombies are not smart, they're just rabid. You just gotta not get bit. So you could fight that, you can defend against that. If you lived in the wild with animals, you could defend yourself against other species because their natural instinct is their own survival. Zombies don't care about their own survival. They're not protecting themselves. You fight them and you can take them out. Other animals on Earth are wired just like we are for survival. So of course, it would be hard to fight a lion, for example. But I'm saying, for the most part, you can fight off an animal. And as long as you can defend yourself to a point where they are worried about their life, they could back off. So you could, like any other species on the planet, live amongst any other species on the planet and still live and defend yourself. But not against aliens. That would be the worst one. If aliens landed, we couldn't survive against aliens because in order for life on another planet somewhere to make it to our galaxy and to make it to Earth, they've got to be smarter than we are. And if they're smarter than we are, we're not a threat to them, right? Now, maybe we could defend ourselves with some of our weaponry, but from an individual human standpoint, you run into an alien, you're the zombie, essentially. They're smarter than you. Your life is more at risk than theirs is, which means it's harder to defend yourself against them. So that would suck. Like if an asteroid were to hit us in November and it's going to wipe everything out, then you could just be like, well, you know what? None of this matters then. But if it's an alien invasion, that's a different story. Again, it's probably all just another big nothing burger, but something made these scientists decide to notice this more than something else, right? There's all kinds of asteroids and meteors and space debris flying around up there. Why is this one a thing? Like, what is actually going on? Maybe we want to hear a little bit more about that. I mean, it's easy to be like, no, it's not actual aliens. Okay, so it's not actual aliens, fine. But what made them notice, of all the things floating around up there, why are they paying attention to this? Is whatever it is its trajectory one that could hit Earth, especially as early as November? So I hope they come out with a little bit more clarification on that. But I don't know. I tend to believe there's life out there somewhere, and not from a fantasy standpoint, but just from a pure odds standpoint. Why do we have life on Earth? Because we are a rock floating in space that happens to be in orbit of a star. And the orbit around this star that we are in, around the sun, happens to be just the right distance to sustain an atmosphere. And using the warmth of that star, but not too close that it burns us and not too far away that we don't get enough warmth, and all the other elements, life was able to evolve here on this planet. And you're telling me that somewhere in this vast universe, this never-ending universe, there's not another rock close enough to a star at a distance in orbit that's just right for some sort of life to sustain? So I believe that somewhere out there, there is some sort of life as we know it, whether it's plant life, species life, something, microorganism, something. The pure odds based on what we believe makes life sustain on Earth. Our location to the sun, essentially. So, what if we get alien visitors? Have you seen the movie Independence Day? What if that's how we're spending our November? Like, damn it, I can't watch football Sunday because I gotta go fly this plane into an alien spacecraft. Scary, but would be cool as well, wouldn't it? Also, what if they brought back mental institutions? This is something else that's happened this week. Again, overshadowed by all the Epstein talk. But Trump has suggested that institutions need to come back for the homeless to be thrown in. And like everything else Trump does, you automatically get people who drop to their knees and praise it as the greatest thing, and you automatically get people who rage about how it's the worst thing in the world and we're all going to die. That's pretty much how the Trump thing goes. It's everything he says is, he must be God, or everything he says is life as we know it's going to end and we're all going to die if it happens. But it's a very interesting topic to bring back mental institutions, and there's very legit reasons for bringing them back and for not bringing them back. But I think in theory, when you're looking at these homeless people, and we always have these We always care about the homeless when we're using it to make someone else look bad. Look how much money they spent there. That can make sure the homeless people have food for 3 years, right? But the same people who say that will walk by a homeless person at 7-Eleven and just be like, I'm not giving you anything. Right? So we all care about the homeless when we can use it to our advantage in some way, some argument, debate, trying to push a policy, something. But I think in general, a lot of people agree that if we could find a way to make it so people aren't sleeping on the street, so they're not sleeping in 90-degree night and bugs and mugginess in the summer, and not trying to stay warm all night when it's 20 degrees in the winter, I think we can all agree that we would like to see some sort of solution to that. And I think that's why we do make the arguments. How much money was wasted here when it could have went to a different cause? But wouldn't this kind of be doing that? So whether you call it mental institutions or homeless shelters, it would essentially be the same thing, as long as we don't fall into how the movies depict they treat mental institutions. And the movies depict that because that's how it was at one point. But if we're talking about a roof over their head, food, and medical care for people that are truly homeless, and the majority of people who are homeless, statistically, are homeless due to some sort of mental fallout or mental disability that's led them to be familyless and homeless, or an addiction to some sort of narcotic that has led them to homelessness. And you get the few sprinkled in there that are full-blown alcoholics that have pushed them out of their life and home, full-blown gamblers. But for the most part, there's an addiction or something mentally wrong with people who are living on the street, like actually living on the street. And something like this would give them medical care and take them off the street. The stigma around mental institutions is that there's no real rehabilitation, whereas a homeless shelter or something of the sort could be looked at as a way of rehabilitating people, but it doesn't have to be that way. It could be deemed a mental institution with the hope of being able to rehabilitate people, because there's a lot of also mental disorders now that people used to be institutionalized for, that now they have actual fixes for, or they have ways that people can manage it, which is why some of us, even though we come off as really mentally unstable sometimes, aren't in an institution. Why there's no institution to throw us in anymore, or to trap us in. We go to visit our family member and some lady in a bun in 1960s heels decides, this one looks special. Let's trap him here and keep him here, like a movie. That's what people are worried about. Take people you disagree with and throw them in concentration camps. No, this isn't a movie. And it's not left or right. It's both people with this word. With Trump suggesting it, you have a bunch of people on the left who are like, no, Trump's going to throw his political opponents in there and say they have some sort of mental illness. He's going to throw all the transsexual people in there. But you've got prominent talking heads on the right that are saying the same thing. As soon as Trump's out of office, the left will use this to throw conservatives in mental institutions. And it's like, come on, people, you don't think that there's a process that we can come up with to make sure people aren't getting thrown into these places due to politics? I mean, I know politics is bad and we're so divided, but do you really think it's that bad? If it was called a homeless shelter instead of mental institutions, would people be more happy? If the actual goal is to get people who have these uncurable mental diseases or have these addictions to get them help, and of course, take them off the streets to better the safety of the public, I think we should explore that. I know, you hate Trump. He suggested it. Therefore, it's a terrible idea. But maybe it's not. Maybe it's something that we should really look into. Maybe we don't call it a mental institution. Maybe we call it rehabilitation centers. Maybe we call it a homeless shelter. But what if we actually did it? What if we actually rounded people up who are for real on the street? All these videos you see of these inner city areas in different cities of the country where people are standing bent over because they're so doped up on stuff they can't even stand up straight. What if we just rounded them up and put them in a home? Even if you gave them drugs in the mental institution, even if you gave them whatever they're addicted to, isn't it better in a controlled setting? Isn't it less of a public safety risk to have them drugged up indoors instead of on the street? I mean, some people are not able to be rehabilitated. Some people are drug addicts and it's just not going to work. And I'm not advocating for just let drugs pour on the street and let people have all the drugs they want. No, you keep hard drugs illegal, the selling of them illegal, the usage of them illegal. But in a controlled setting where it's a mental institution or halfway house or whatever you want to, I don't even know what, just a homeless shelter. I mean, I think it's something that we should honestly look at. Everyone claims they're willing to spend the funding. If they take it from somewhere else, they're willing to spend the funding to get homeless people off the street. Well, this is an opportunity to start going down that path by entertaining that idea. Just so many what ifs this week, you know? So many things we could talk about. But everyone seems more focused on trying to dig up which politicians they don't like happen to have taken a picture with Epstein, that these other stories just kind of get pushed under the rug. But some things don't get pushed under the rug. Some things get turned into a thing no matter what. And what if we stop doing that? What if we stop turning everything into a thing? What if we stop acting like it bothered us that Sydney Sweeney did an American Eagle jeans commercial? Like, why is this a thing? What if people didn't care that when you're watching TV and a commercial comes on, that the couple in the commercial is gay, or black, or trans, or a mixed couple? Like, why do these things, why do we turn everything into a thing? What is going on? It's just what our news is filled with. This is micro-racism, and this is micro-sexism, and this is, like, why is everything, you know, there's a post that kind of went viral, at least in the post that I see, but it was shared an awful lot and had hundreds of thousands of views and comments and all this other stuff. And it was about some blog that put out some article on how today's teens have rewatched the original American Pie movies and found it overly offensive and found it over the top and objectifying women, and they made it a thing. And it's like, why? Of course American Pie from back in the 90s was over the top offensive and objectified women in an over the top manner. That was the whole point of the movie. That's what the comedy was. It was just a funny movie. If your teen is watching this movie today and going, I guess this is how I should treat women and see women? That's a you problem, not the movie's problem. Like, I miss the 90s. When things were offensive because they were meant to be funny, where people didn't get offended by things that were not actually offensive. Not everything was turned into a thing. And I remember seeing this post and just thinking, what is going on? What have we done? What has social media led to? I don't get the offense in the Sydney Sweeney American Eagle commercial. But of course I'm white, so I'm not allowed to understand the offense, right? Of course I don't. Because racism, right? Why would I understand? I don't know. It's just, what if we didn't make everything a thing? There was another mass shooting in New York this week. And here we're about to jump into the guns argument again. Because every time there's a mass shooting, that's all that happens from it. Everyone argues guns, and then it goes away, and then there's another shooting. What if we stopped blaming the guns for people being an asshole? What if we stopped worrying about what the skin color of the shooter was, or what their political affiliation was, or what religion they followed, because none of that matters? What if we more focused on what would possess anyone to shoot a bunch of innocent people? What if that was a solution to stopping mass shootings? What if it didn't matter what kind of guns you ban, because people who murder people are going to break that ban and use that gun anyway? What if we focused on the real work, like trying to figure out what would possess someone to shoot a bunch of innocent people, and how to get people to value life again so they don't wake up one day and say, you know what, I'm going to take a bunch of innocent people out? What if we stopped turning everything into some political debate and found solutions to fixing the problem? What if we've already tried gun laws? What if those gun laws are not working? What if murder is already banned and people are violating that? What if we found another way to try to get through to people to stop shooting each other? And of course, what if I'm wrong? What if we need to ban guns? Certain guns? All guns? Then what? Honestly, what would happen if they signed a piece of paper that said guns are banned? Does it make guns magically disappear? You do a buyback period, sure. People could turn in their guns with amnesty. What is there, 400 million guns out there? You get 100 million turned in. Great. What do you do about the other 300 million in circulation? You go door to door, every house, every strip mall, every office building, every storage unit, search for guns. Do you knock on people's doors? Say, hey, guns were banned now. You have to turn them in. Okay. Nope, I don't have any guns in here. No worries. What do? Do you force yourself in and search my house anyway? Do you tear up every single wall to make sure I'm not hiding them since the gun ban? Dig through garden beds to make sure I didn't bury any since the gun ban? Can you even come into my house and check? Would you need a warrant for that? You see, banning guns and removing guns from the street are two completely different things, and the latter is not actually practical. You do all of that, even get warrants to search every frickin' house in the country. There's no resources for that. And then do you do that every single week? Do more gun sweeps to make sure since having your house checked 3 weeks ago, you haven't since obtained a gun? It's impossible. I'm not against laws that try to help keep people safe, but the fact of the matter is, if you ban guns at this point, there's no practical way to remove all of guns from society. So you won't even know that someone's breaking that gun ban until they pulled the trigger and it's too late. That ban did not save that person's life because you didn't know that ban was being violated until that person was killed with a gun. But you know what? Sign all the gun bans away. What if we started attacking policy with the idea that if it doesn't work, we'll admit it didn't work and we'll revert back? What if you banned all guns tomorrow and everyone who owns a gun that's not a murderer, that's not out murdering people, gave up all their guns? And then 3 weeks from now, someone who ignored your ban walks into a school and shoots up a bunch of kids. What if then you said, okay, maybe these bans aren't working. Maybe people who violate bans still violate them. Maybe it's true that murder is already banned and people violated that, so banning the weapon they use to murder is also not going to work. And again, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. It's just round and round we go with the gun debate. Never ending, like every other debate. Because no one wants to give in a little bit. What if we did have a national healthcare system? What if we tried that? Like, why is it a thing where if it's something I'm not comfortable with or something I don't fully agree with, it's going to be the end of the world and there's no way to go back from it? So much I could talk about, all the what ifs. But what if while listening to this podcast, you hit that little like button, you hit that little follow button, you hit that little subscribe button, maybe you hit that little share button. Like, what if you shared it? Doesn't cost you anything. What could it hurt? Don't make everything a thing. Like, subscribe, share the Five Head Podcast. Thank you all for listening. And again, if you want to reach out to me, it's eric.middleviewmedia@gmail.com. Any kind of topic you want me to get into, anything else you want to talk about, anything you want to debate or ask questions, please email me or comment wherever you're listening to the podcast, and I will try to address it on follow-on podcasts. Have a good week, everyone. Five Head out.